Hey everyone, Ryan here. So, let's talk about holidays. In America, you've got the big ones, right? Christmas, where you get presents. Thanksgiving, where you eat until you can't move and then argue with your uncle about politics. And the 4th of July, where you celebrate independence by setting off small explosives in your backyard. But recently, a new holiday joined the federal ranks, and it's one that carries a weight and a history that is profoundly American. Yet for many, still a bit of a mystery. I'm talking about Juneteenth. Now you might have heard the name, seen it on your calendar, and thought, cool, another long weekend. And hey, who doesn't love a long weekend? But Juneteenth is so much more than that. It represents a promise delayed, a freedom that had to be delivered by hand, long after it was declared. It's a day that marks a critical turning point in the nation's history, the real end of the institution of slavery. It's a story of resilience, of joy in the face of unimaginable hardship, and a powerful reminder that freedom isn't always a single, clean-cut event. It's a process. So today, we're going to dive deep into that story. We're going to unpack the layers behind this pivotal day, which officially became a federal holiday in 2021. We'll explore some surprising and honestly pretty mind-blowing facts that you probably didn't learn in your history class. Because understanding Juneteenth isn't just about understanding Black history, it's about understanding American history in its fullest, most complicated, and ultimately, its most human form. Let's get into it. So, to understand Juneteenth, you have to go back to the Civil War. On January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, in our heads, this is the moment the credits roll, right? Slavery over, freedom for all. But history, like a terrible cell phone plan, is full of fine print and terrible reception. The proclamation was a brilliant strategic move for sure. It declared that all enslaved people in the Confederate States, the ones in rebellion against the Union, were thenceforward and forever free. The key words there are in the Confederate States. This meant it didn't apply to the border states, the slave states that had remained loyal to the Union. So, you had this bizarre situation where freedom depended entirely on which side of a line you were standing on. But even more critically, for the proclamation to have any real power in the Confederacy, the Union Army had to actually be there to enforce it. You can't just email freedom to people. It wasn't like Jefferson Davis got a notification on his phone saying, "Lincoln has freed your slaves." It was a declaration of intent, a promise that had to be delivered mile by bloody mile by Union soldiers. Now, fast forward, the war ends in April 1865. Lee surrenders to Grant. You'd think, okay, everyone's free, right? The news must have spread like wildfire. Well, not exactly. Welcome to Texas. Texas was like the most remote corner of the Confederacy, geographically isolated and largely untouched by the direct fighting. Throughout the war, many slaveholders from other southern states had actually moved to Texas, bringing their enslaved people with them, precisely because they thought it was a safe haven, where the institution of slavery could continue, far from the reach of the Union Army. So, for the 250,000 enslaved Black people in Texas, life went on as if nothing had changed. The war was over, Lincoln was dead, but they were still in bondage, working the cotton fields, completely unaware that their freedom had been legally declared 2.5 years earlier. It's a staggering thought. Imagine the biggest news of your life, the very definition of your existence, being withheld from you for over 900 days. It's a delay that is almost impossible to comprehend in our age of instant information. This is where a man named Major General Gordon Granger enters the story. He wasn't one of the superstar generals you read about like Grant or Sherman. He was more of a journeyman military man. On June 19, 1865, Granger and about 2,000 Union troops finally sailed into the port of Galveston, Texas. Their mission was to occupy the state and enforce the law of the land. It was from the balcony of Ashton Villa, a former Confederate headquarters, that Granger's staff officer read out General Order No. 3, the official announcement that would change everything. The order was direct and unambiguous. It began, "The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free." It went on to state that this involved an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. Can you imagine hearing those words? After a lifetime of bondage, after generations of your family being treated as property, to hear a Union general declare in no uncertain terms your absolute equality. That moment, that reading of General Order No. 3 in Galveston, is the very heart of Juneteenth. The reaction to the news was, as you can imagine, immediate and overwhelming. It was an explosion of pure, unadulterated joy. People left the fields, they dropped their tools. There were stories of people literally screaming, dancing, and singing in the streets. Many immediately sought to find family members who had been sold away. Others simply walked off the plantations to experience this new thing called freedom, even if they had no idea where they were going or what they would do next. The very first celebrations were often prayer meetings, a way to give thanks for this long-awaited deliverance. In the years that followed, these spontaneous celebrations began to coalesce into an annual tradition. Former slaves and their descendants would gather on June 19th. These early Juneteenth gatherings, often called Jubilee Day, were part community reunion, part festival. Families would travel for miles to come together. There would be barbecues, fishing, and prayer services. Guest speakers would often read the Emancipation Proclamation and General Order No. 3 aloud, reminding the younger generations of the day freedom finally came. It became a day of education and remembrance, a cornerstone of Black community life, long before the rest of America paid any attention. Now you may have seen the Juneteenth flag flying, and it's a design full of powerful symbolism. It's not just a random collection of colors and shapes. Every single element was chosen with intention. The flag was designed by activist Ben Haith in 1997. The first thing you'll notice is the color scheme, red, white, and blue. This is deliberate. It's meant to declare that the formerly enslaved and their descendants are Americans. It's a direct refutation of any idea that this is just Black history. No, it's American history, woven into the very fabric of the nation. At the center of the flag is a star, which has a dual meaning. First, it represents Texas, the Lone Star State, where Juneteenth originated. But it also represents the freedom of every Black American in all 50 states. The star is surrounded by a burst, which is meant to symbolize a nova, or a new star. This represents a new beginning for Black Americans, a new chapter bursting forth. And finally, you have the arc that extends across the flag. This represents a new horizon and the opportunities ahead. It's a flag of history, hope, and patriotism, all in one. Juneteenth has always been more than just a party. At its core, it is a day for education and reflection. The early celebrations, as we mentioned, always included readings of the historical documents. This wasn't just for show, it was a vital act of self-education for a community that had been systematically denied literacy. It was about ensuring that the story was passed down, that the sacrifices were not forgotten, and that the meaning of that delayed freedom was understood by each new generation. It was a day to teach the children where they came from. That spirit continues today. For many, Juneteenth is a time to reflect on the immense progress that has been made since 1865, but also to honestly assess the long road still ahead in the fight for true equality. It's a day for difficult conversations about the legacy of slavery and how it continues to shape American society, from systemic racism to economic disparities. It serves as a powerful annual check-in for the nation's conscience, a moment to ask, how are we living up to the promise of absolute equality that was written in General Order No. 3? For a long time, Juneteenth was primarily a Texas thing. As Black families migrated from Texas to other parts of the country for economic opportunities, a movement known as the Great Migration, they took their traditions with them. They brought Juneteenth to places like California, Oklahoma, and Louisiana, but for decades it remained a largely regional, community-based observance. It wasn't something you'd see on a national calendar. The first official state recognition came, fittingly, from Texas in 1980, when it made Juneteenth a state holiday. From there, the movement grew slowly but surely, state by state. Other states followed Texas's lead, but it was really a patchwork. Some states recognized it as a day of observance, others as a full-blown state holiday. Celebrations vary widely. In Milwaukee, they have one of the longest-running parades in the country. In Philadelphia, it's a massive cultural festival with music and food. In Galveston, the birthplace, they have historical reenactments and a reading of General Order No. 3 right at Ashton Villa. The way it's celebrated reflects the local culture, but the core message of freedom and remembrance remains the same everywhere. You can't talk about a celebration without talking about the food, and Juneteenth is no exception. Food is, really central to the experience, and the menu is steeped in tradition and symbolism. One of the most prominent features is red-colored food and drink. You'll see red velvet cake, red soda pop, often Big Red, a Texas classic, watermelon, and strawberry pie. This tradition has a couple of possible origins. Some say the red color symbolizes the bloodshed and resilience of the enslaved. Others connect it to the red-hued drinks like hibiscus tea that are common in West Africa, from where many of the enslaved were stolen. Beyond the red foods, the centerpiece of a Juneteenth cookout is often barbecue. This tradition goes back to the very first celebrations, where communities would come together to roast whole pigs or cows over open pits. It was a way to share resources and feed a large crowd. It's a communal act, a feast that represents prosperity and coming together. The food of Juneteenth isn't just delicious, it's a culinary history lesson. It tells a story of survival, of making something beautiful out of what was available, and of the enduring cultural ties to an African heritage. The journey for Juneteenth to become a federal holiday was a marathon, not a sprint. It was a decades-long effort driven by grassroots activists and community leaders. While Texas made it a state holiday in 1980, the push for national recognition was a much tougher climb. For years, resolutions would be introduced in Congress only to fizzle out without much support. It was seen by many as a special interest holiday, rather than one that was essential to the entire American story. The idea just didn't have momentum on a national level. Everything changed in the summer of 2020. Following the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent global protests for racial justice, there was a massive cultural and political shift. Suddenly, conversations about systemic racism, American history, and the Black experience were front and center in a way they hadn't been for generations. There was a widespread public demand to acknowledge the parts of American history that had been overlooked or ignored. In this new climate, the push for Juneteenth gained unstoppable momentum. The Senate passed the bill unanimously, the House passed it overwhelmingly, and on June 17, 2021, it was finally signed into law. When you talk about the advocacy for Juneteenth, one name stands above all others: Opal Lee. She is affectionately known as the grandmother of Juneteenth. A retired teacher and lifelong activist from Fort Worth, Texas, Miss Lee made it her life's mission to see Juneteenth become a national holiday. She remembered celebrating it as a child in Texas, and she believed that its message of freedom was something every American needed to hear and understand. She didn't just talk about it, she took action in a truly remarkable way. In 2016, at the age of 89, Opal Lee decided she would walk from her home in Fort Worth to Washington, D.C. She planned to walk 2.5 miles each day to symbolize the 2.5 years it took for the news of freedom to reach Texas. Her symbolic walk garnered national attention and brought a new focus to the cause. She delivered a petition with 1.5 million signatures to Congress. When Juneteenth was finally signed into law in 2021, Opal Lee was there, standing right next to the president in the White House, a guest of honor witnessing her life's work come to fruition. It was a testament to the power of one person's unwavering persistence. So there you have it. Juneteenth isn't just the newest federal holiday, it's a day with over 150 years of history, a day born from a painful delay but celebrated with profound joy. It's a story about the complexities of freedom, the importance of memory, and the enduring power of community. Understanding Juneteenth is essential because it fills in a critical gap in the American narrative. It reminds us that progress isn't always linear, and that the fight for justice and equality is an ongoing journey, not a destination we've already reached. I really encourage you to dig deeper. Read about the history, listen to the stories, and learn about the people like Opal Lee who kept the flame of remembrance alive for so long when no one else was paying attention. The history is rich, and it's right there for all of us to learn from. More than that, I hope you'll get involved. Look up what's happening in your own community. Go to a local Juneteenth parade, festival, or educational event. It's a day of celebration open to everyone, because ultimately that's the point. Juneteenth celebrates a moment of liberation for Black Americans, but its message of freedom, resilience, and hope is a universal one. It's a piece of American history that belongs to all of us. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.